Hello witches, and welcome back to Activist Witch, where we discuss witchcraft and activism. You can call me Isha, my pronouns are she, they, and today's video is going to be the celebratory Q&A for 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for being here and having accompanied me in the last 10 months. I've done one of these for 1,000 subscribers, so I'll link it down in the description below. And without any further ado, let's get started, because we have stuff to talk about: personal questions, autism, queerness, and indeed, witchcraft and activism. But before we get started, let me remind you that I've opened a Ko-fi, which is an alternative to Patreon that takes less from creators. And on there you can do a one-off donation, a monthly donation, or even get a tarot reading with me, Italian style. The low-income option starts at £5. And if you decide to support me there, thank you so very much. It's happening. We're going to witchcraft, which is kind of the reason why originally we are here. And there's also a bit of activism there, so there you go, because it's Activist Witch, they come together. ButterChicken83 asks me, I was just curious about how the path revealed itself to you. In hindsight, do you think you were a witch long before you realized it? And if so, where did you see it express itself? I meant to do a video about this, but it never got enough votes when I put it to the vote to the community. Eventually, I'll just do it. So I mentioned it in my first video, in my video about what being a witch means to me. The current practice and path revealed itself in a not so nice way because we had a loss in the family, Whiska, and because I detached myself a bit too much from the world. My spouse was getting a bit concerned and suggested to me, very out of character for them, in my perception, to do a ritual, which was a spell, to help Whiska cross over and ask the help of Persephone to do that. And I say that it's out of character because Raven is a very steeped in facts and information and data person. They were planning on studying physics at university, so you can tell from that the kind of person they are. So it was surprising, but it was incredibly healing and consoling because I have a lot of issues with that. I suffer from thanatophobia. So it's, it's the way that very slap in the face it manifested itself to me, this phase of my path. Do I think in hindsight that I was always a witch? Always a witch, I don't know, but that supernatural, inexplicable things have always happened to me. Yes, absolutely. It's the reason why I have the life that I have. There are crucial points of my past where there shouldn't even have been a fork in the road, and I accidentally was pushed through the third way of the road that wasn't supposed to happen for anyone that came from my background and had my skills or talents or abilities. It never happened before. I don't know if it will happen again. I hope it will, but it's crucial nodes in time that pushed my life in a direction that it had no reason to go, and I can completely see when I look back the way that, given my upbringing and given the place that I was brought up in, what my life would have become. And I don't say this for sympathy or anything like that, and we don't need to go much in detail to it, but I know for a fact that if I'd lived the life that I was on the path to live because of where I was born, because what was taught to me, I wouldn't have got as old as I have. And the simple fact that things happened and these huge nodes explode over my life path and allowed me to take pathways and roads that have nothing to do, and it hasn't happened to anyone else that comes from where I come from or has my background or has my marginalizations. It's a step beyond luck. It's what people would call divine intervention, I guess. So I know for a fact that there's always been something looking out for me in ways that are not explainable by modern science or modern culture. I also have a very peculiar attitude for tarot. Like, I don't like It's always weird for me to talk about it because it seems like I am blowing my own trumpet, and I don't like doing that. I never did. But every time that someone tells me feedback on their tarot readings with me, there is a way that they say you read the person and not the tarot, but because I mainly do tarot readings online and of the person, I know the question and their name. There's not much to read there. And also the cards are the cards. You pick certain cards out of 78. And there are limited ways to read certain cards. When you pick a Three of Swords, it doesn't matter that you know or you don't know this person. It's bad stuff, and there's no way to turn it around. There are few cards that I see in a way that it's just bad. There's no way to turn it around. So when I do a reading like that, I'm always like, what am I saying to this person? Maybe their life is ship-shape and shiny, and I tell them, okay, what's the tragedy here? And rightfully, they're gonna knock on wood and think that I am just putting jinx on them. And no, the last time that it happened, actually Vonnie was so nice to make a video review of one of my tarot readings. And that is something that makes me realize that the way that I connect to the cards and for some reason to the people that do readings and ask readings of me, it has something inexplicable in it. Even when I don't believe in it too much. If you want details, I'll send you to the video review that Vonnie did because that shook me. That shook me. That was a slap in the face. I was like, it's not possible. I don't know these things. I can't know these things. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. Ella, she went into the woods, asked me, what's your favorite herb to work with? I think nowadays it's rosemary. Because also the rosemary that we get in the UK comes from Italy. And there is something there, as much as having rosemary and lavender in front of the entrance of your house is not quite as traditional in Italy as it is here in the UK. So it's weird the way that these things connect. But yeah, rosemary, sage, like normal cooking sage, basil, because those are also the aromatic herbs that you can buy in the shop. I don't let them survive amazingly, but I can buy them in the shop. It's very easy for me to work with them. A lot of my bundles for fumigating the house are made of rosemary that is just literally bought from Tesco. So yes, rosemary mainly. It's good to cook with, it tastes nice. When you boil it and make water, it does amazing thing for your curls, back to the curls question. So yeah, it's rosemary. It works on so many different levels. Oh, Eclectic Pupil, who also helped me recently with voiceovers from one of my turfs videos, so thank you, asked me these questions. How is working with / worshipping the Egyptian gods coming along? I love the pantheon and I always like hearing other people's stories. Sarah is the Serpent asks me about Kemetism as well. Not so much a question, but definitely would love an update on your thoughts on Kemetism and working with Egyptian deities. I only discovered your channel recently and have been binge watching some of your videos, thank you, and was particularly interested in the one where you discussed Kemetism. If you've seen my first and only video on Kemetism, you might have seen that I was a bit skeptical about dipping my toes there, because despite being half Egyptian genetically, I don't know the culture. I've never been to Egypt. I've never been around the Egyptian culture, even through my father or my cousins, because I've never been around them. So I was a bit skeptical to go there just based on blood and genetics. I couldn't quite pinpoint my finger as to why. And then I read this book and I understood why. Because A, expecting someone to worship the gods or work with the tradition that they belong to because of their marginalization is low-key racist. It's an expectation that you shouldn't put on people. 2, it's a very dangerous thing to think of hereditary entitlements that work through the blood. Because as I've talked about in the first video about why so many witches are turfs, the idea of the power is in the blood is something very easily co-opted by, guess what, fascist, Nazis and the New Right, and the idea that you can pass powers through the blood. There are certain family traditions that are just within biological family. It's very easy to then go into eugenics and bioessentialism. We don't like that. It's one of the reasons also why I started to be skeptical about a lot of traditions that we have in Italy that are passed through the family because of that. The only thing that I still like and appreciate comes from my friend Freddie, who is a witch and is Italian but lives here in the UK as well. Hi, Freddie. And he has been passed the gift to read and dispel the evil eye because he ran from all the side of his family, really. But not because it has to run in the blood, because it's a gift that you transfer to someone, and you transfer it on the night of Christmas Eve. So usually you are with your family Christmas Eve, so that's why you're transferring it to someone in your family. But he literally said, if you want, I can pass it to you, we just need to be together that night. So understanding that it can just be based on care and love and closeness rather than the blood, that I can go along with. So in return to the actual question of Egyptian gods, what do I do there? The simple fact that I am Egyptian was not enough, would not be enough. However, there are things of the Egyptian pantheon that unfortunately got to me through colonialism, because that's how the Egyptian pantheon got to us in general, through Victorian and French colonialism in the 1800s. There is a certain kind of, not even aesthetic, but visuals that I feel connected to, because that's the likely reason for it. The village that I come from is in Piedmont. The capital of Piedmont is Turin. Turin, other than being the esoteric capital of Italy, also had an Egyptian museum. Without going into the details of how problematic it is that we have so much Egyptian stuff in Italy or in the British Museum, because that's an issue and it should be returned. Because of that, we spoke about Egyptian history often in like elementary school, so that kind of stuck with me. And my love for cats, unsurprisingly, drives me to have an interest toward Bast or Bastet. And because she also oversees a very similar domain to Vesta, I have this sort of interest. Will I explore it? Will I work with? I don't know. But what, again, this book made me realize at the same time is that there is a way to make cultural exchange work when you do not exploit the culture that you're invited in. And I will still count as myself as invited in, because it's not a culture that I'm in, despite the marginalization that I get from being Egyptian, therefore Arab. A, you do not exploit it. B, you do it for the benefit of the community that is represented, in this case, the Kemetist. And most importantly, because there are few things more scary than thinking of white people only working with white gods, thinking that divinity is only represented by something that looks like them and it's white. And that is not something that I had thought about before, but that is definitely a gateway to consider for white people, to consider interacting with pantheons and traditions that are not white and marginalized, if they are invited to it, and if, while doing it respectfully, they understand that that is something even superior to them, that does not necessarily just look like them, which should help in the grand scheme of things. If you do prayers, do you look for prayers online, in books, or do you compose your own? How do you go about making them? Aha! I have my daily charms that I say to Vesta and to Venus. I've seen stuff in books. I wanted to incorporate it. It takes me a second to learn it by memory, so I haven't. What I've accidentally done with both Venus and Vesta is I have my way to say good morning and good night to them, and the way that I dedicate their candles to them. And it has accidentally come out in Italian, which is not a language that I speak in my daily life anymore. My psychologist suggests that it's a way for me to reclaim part of my childhood and the entitlement that I should have to my language as Italian, which I don't feel like I do, through some sort of liturgy that I imprinted on in church. And I realized that some of the things that I say, I can't quite say how specifically, but they sound similar to something that I must have heard in church. So there's that. What are your favorite incense scents? Do you prefer sticks, cones, or loose? Do you prefer oils? I have oils and I have stick incense. I don't use other kind of incense. I have cones, but I don't know. They last less. I don't know. My favorite, absolutely, I use Satya. The Satya Bangalore, not the other Satya. There's a story about the two brothers Satya. One is a good way to do incense. The other is mostly artificial scents, and you can tell, and they're too intense. And so yeah, Satya Bangalore, BNG, is the proper one. You know what? I'll link a post about that, because when I discovered it, mind blown. My favorite scents. So I use lavender for Vesta, I use rose for Venus, and I also have for the house white sage, which I've had since the beginning. I don't know if I would buy it again for appropriation reason. And cinnamon. The new cinnamon that they have done, the one that has the green organic product stamp, it's amazing. It smells like proper cinnamon. It has that spice properly, smells amazing. I would have to say cinnamon. Even the old cinnamon wasn't too bad. It smells of fireplace. But the new cinnamon... Do you do any art, crafts, writing, any creative endeavors for your deities? Do you mind showing us some and telling their stories? I know this is a very personal question, don't feel pressure to share. I was about to say I'm not a very artistic person, that's a lie. I think the most artistic thing that I do and dedicate to them are either posts that I do about them on Instagram or the video that I've done here about them. That's most of my creative endeavor dedicated to them. Yeah, I'll link both Vesta and Venus video in the description down below. Are they due for an update? I think they're pretty complete, to be fair. I can't think of things to add necessarily at the moment. I'm very proud of both, and I was very glad to see there are a lot of people that wanted to work with either Venus, Aphrodite, or Vesta, Hestia. We're very happy to have found them, so I'm very proud of those. LJD Ben 7774 asks me, what are your thoughts on spirit guides? Do you believe we all have spirits that are assigned to us and guides us? And if so, how do you worship them? So, I don't know if the definition of spirit guides or guardian angels fit with what I think. But as I mentioned before, I know for a fact that there's something or someone that has been looking out for me and make certain pathways open for me that allowed me to live where I was born and raised and was supposed to be limited within all my life. And by doing that, they allowed me to live as long as I have. So I have absolutely no doubt that some of these things were driven by something higher. Was it a spirit guide? Was it a deity, which is something that I've considered recently? Was it a guardian angel? I don't know, because I am skeptical not about them, but about my abilities to discern them. But there is something higher, and somebody's been looking out for me. And yeah, that's... yes, is the short answer. How? Don't know, but yes. Mishaza asks me, thank you for your work. Book recommendations on your favorite depictions of witches as main or side characters. I don't read fiction. That's... yeah. So there's this wrong belief about me that people have that I must read so much. Possibly because I have a certain eloquency. If you think so, thank you. But I don't. I am dyslexic. Reading is an incredible chore for me. So a long, long time ago, I've given myself this rule that if I have the energy and patience to read, it needs to be non-fiction because I need to learn something real about the world. And so I am not a fiction person. Second question, are there wizards in your community and is patriarchy a thing there as well? No. Are there wizards? Possibly. Yes, absolutely. And also, without going into my community, like there's people like Matt Orin, and he is a witch. I wouldn't even necessarily use another word, thinking that witch is somewhat feminine, and then we need another word like warlock or wizard. Witch works. And In my local community, I am really lucky. We have all connected, the people in my coven have connected through being activists and being queer and going to protests. So patriarchy is something that we work to smash. At some point, there was the proposal of naming ourselves as the Anarchist Coven of South Wales. So that should give you an idea of the kind of lack of hierarchy that we have there. Yeah. I'll say this though, there are a couple of male practitioners, especially that I know either through books or YouTube, that something rubs me in a wrong way. And I think sometimes it has to do with the way that some men, especially if they are white, cis and straight, have this way of saying things that has been taught to them and has been taught to them as this is the right way, that you are entitled to express yourself, that goes into mansplaining. And so when I have to go and find information about the connection to queerness of a deity like Venus, and I have a white cishet man telling me about it, to have the confidence and arrogance of white cishet men to talk about things they don't need to have first-hand experience, as if they are experts. Hey, that's the only thing. Eliana Dickens asks me, do you work with deities, and if so, what deities do you find most helpful within activism? And two-sided answer. I do work with deities, officially with Vesta and Venus. Neither of them are exactly the kind of energy that I envision for activism. Vesta is very homely and caring, and she keeps me safe in my house and provides me the cornerstone onto which my life can then exist and flourish, and I can also do activism. But without a safe space doing that from, I wouldn't be able to do anything. So in that sense, she definitely contributes to my ability to do activism at all. On the other side, Venus is the kind of care to me that expands to my community, and so takes care of me within a social context, if it makes sense. So I do not doubt the fact that probably when I was at protests or things like that, or the way that sometimes I was put on the map for activism things, have to do with her. That being said, when asked this kind of questions, when I've been asked questions about how do you do spells, how do you do works about activism, I am always more hesitant to put specifications around it. Not because I am protective or anything like that, but because it's not that clear to myself either. I have this weird vision, bear with me, it's not even a UPG, it's a feeling that hasn't necessarily even been verified in any way, even personally. I have this interest that comes in from time to time for Hecate and for Lilith. In my perception, it is because Hecate is, in a way, the more ruthless, because I was trying to find a non-racialized word like dark shadow. No, we don't use those words. But has more of a ruthlessness to the same energy that Vesta has. So Vesta is cozy and taking care of me. I see Hecate as protective of what is me and mine, and ready to put spikes on the outside if anything there's coming. I don't necessarily work with her like I do with Vesta and Venus, but there have been hints here and there that sometimes it's worth saying hello. One very peculiar day last winter, in one day I found 2 keys, and I think Eddie, the Wolfsbane Witch, made a video discussing signs and the way that applied using that example, so I'll send you to Eddie's video. So there's been this feeling that sometimes it's worth saying hello there. But that's very personal, but it has to do with justice. I've had trouble with my mother, and when I had to do protection and banishments that had to do with her, I called upon Hecate. Vice versa, the more rough, no, but ruthless, again, side of Venus, of Aphrodite, to me is Lilith. It might also be because during a meditation at a sound bath, that is something that Ray and I used to do, I had these pictures coming into my head. One of them was this picture. I'm going to put it here. And in my head, I went like, oh, that's Aphrodite. That must be Aphrodite. It's my two deities. One is Vesta, one is Aphrodite. That must be Aphrodite. And then evidently somewhere in my head was tugged away the information that, no, that's a painting of Lilith. And I think through Emily, Witchcraft and Tarot, there is a lot of talking about Lilith being this rebellious, rightfully divine feminine, but in the sense of even rebel against the tight box that was given to femininity. So I have a feeling that she would be amazing to work with in terms of activism. Do I have the energy to add another deity to my daily workings? No. But I love the idea, and maybe one day I'll find a way to work with Hecate and Lilith as well, because to me they are the other side, the yin to yang in a way, to Venus and Vesta. But that's my personal absolute take on that. Hayley O'Grady asked me, books recommendation, anything on witchcraft activism. I know there's one book at least, have you read it? I have a full reading list on my Ko-fi, which is free, but I'll link it down in the description below, where I've put together all the books that so far I have read or skimmed through that are about witchcraft, are about activism, or consider witchcraft through an intersectional and feminist lens, which naturally brings in activism. So I'll just link that down in the description below. It is constantly updated as well, so if I find a book that fits, that wasn't there, I'll add it. If you know of a book that is not there, leave me a comment, I'll add it. Aha, the other questions of Laura Laverne that had to do with magic and witchcraft, which are: Hi Magic, thoughts, have you dabbled? And there's another one, and then I'll read that later. So I asked them clarification on high magic, but they didn't tell me. So I'm going on the assumption that high magic is ceremonial magic here. I'm going on that assumption because something that I find really funny is that I think Lon Milo Duquette has a book where he talks, and he does ceremonial magic, but he talks about the fact that his teacher was very adamant that when you do high magic is something for a higher purpose, and when you do even ceremonial magic for your own return, that's low magic. So I don't know if that's also considered a division. Right now I'm considering high magic as in ceremonial magic. Have I dabbled? I do just the LBRP. That's the most that I have dabbled in ceremonial magic. The first books that I have read that were just generic witchcraft and weren't good books, and actually I'm soon going to do a Snog, Marry, Avoid for witchcraft beginners books, because there is a book that is the book that I started on that is dangerous, don't use that. But one of the things that this book brought was casting a circle, calling the quarters, according to no tradition, like not even the proper Wicca one, but anyway, that's where I started, and then I learned more, and then I realized, oh, actually what they do here is an adaptation of the LBRP. Let's just do the LBRP. And then ideally you do the LBRP, the LIRP, the Lesser Invoking Ritual of the Pentagram, and then LBRP again. But anyway, so yeah, that's the main thing that I do. I was literally talking about it to my friend Sofia Righetti yesterday, because there's this impression that ceremonial magic takes a lot of energy. It's true. So if you're a spoony witch like me, don't necessarily feel the pressure. I think I've done my last LBRP in May. The ambition this year was to do it every day. Yeah, it takes energy. On the other hand, it gives me something in return that makes magic not questionable, in the sense that the way that my hands especially feel after I've done the LBRP is as close as to feel energy that I can't see and I can't technically touch that I've ever had. Like my hands feel heavy, as if there's a ball that I'm holding, but it's not quite there. Almost tingly, but not quite. I have started to do the LBRP because Astrological taught me, like sent me a version of the official LBRP, and I started to do it based on that. And the first time that I did it, I immediately told her, I was like, oh my God, like I can feel things. And she was like, I forgot how much it impacts people that have never done it. So that is very interesting. If you've never done anything of high magic and you have the energy, it's worth a try. There are specific, I think there are tutorials and people have done it that show you how to do it. I think Foolish Fish has done it. It's a good version. And it's something, it still requires a ton of energy, and it can be a problem for disabled witches or with limited spoons, like it's my case. So, you know. As a queer person, how do you see Jung's anima and animus concept? I will send you to the video that Benny Bell Wen did on, I think, Jung and Freud. The work that she does is, I can only aspire to. You think that I do video essays? Go watch the stuff that she has done on Jung and Freud, because, wow, that is research, that is scholarly, that is amazing. I'm not surprised that she's a lawyer and all those kind of official big things, because, wow. And that goes into it, but I am skeptical about a lot of Jung and Freud because they are naturally misogynistic and racist people, and I am not necessarily into buying that kind of thing. I do recognize that they have had an influence in the world, that they did have the value to have that influence, not sure. How do you strengthen your connection to Vesta? What are some rituals or method of worship that you enjoy doing with her? Do you have any recommendation on how a new devotee to Vesta can build a relationship with her in a respectful way? Do you know any other syncretic deities associated with Hestia/Vesta? For example, does she have an Etruscan, Norse, Egyptian equivalent? I tried Googling, but I couldn't find anything, so I'm curious if you have any personal opinions on the subject. As Vesta is your patron and I'm praying she will be mine, I would just love to hear you talk about her for hours. Okay, I will send you to the Vesta video, which probably you've already seen. I started to work with Vesta very accidentally, out of need. I didn't mean to, because everybody tells you if you're a beginner, you don't try to immediately work with deities. But I was getting homeless, and Goddess of the Hearth and Home seemed like a natural entity to go and ask for help. So that's how I started. And I started with a deal, a pact. I was making a spell to find a house, and I literally just add her to a spell saying, hey, I need a place that it can be safe and comfortable, and if you help me find this place, get this place, for every day that I am in that house, I will light you a candle. How about that? I bribed her, in a way. And she took the bribe. I don't know. There's probably a better and more respectful way to say that, but that's how it happened with me. And if it hadn't happened that way, would I have sought after a deity? I don't know. But yeah. How do I strengthen my connection with her? So, despite the fact that I do my daily candles with her because I promised her, there have been times, especially lately, that I felt not growing apart, but I knew, like my subconscious clearly knows that because I've been very burnt out, COVID in July really left me half dead. Despite the fact that I do these things daily, clearly I have less energy to put in it. And then this weird thing happened, which on one side, it probably was just a bad batch of incense. But on the other side, 3 incense sticks, almost in a row, stopped burning midway, despite the fact that they weren't consumed or with less incense to justify the stopping of burning. So that I took as in, we need to talk. So last week I did a reading with her. That's how I communicate with her. I have dedicated a tarot deck for her. And technically on Sundays, that's the ambition. On Sundays I do readings with her. I hadn't done a reading since June. So if she felt left out, she was kind of right. And I was sorry for that because, again, without the cornerstone, you don't build anything. And the house is the cornerstone. And I love my house and I feel very safe here. And it's so important to have those 4 safe walls. So for me to have left behind my ritual of doing readings with her, I kinda had sort of already the guilt to then read the stopping of the incense as a reminder of, we need to talk, I'm here, like I don't like this. When I light the incense to her, it's literally for Mother Vesta, if I've done any mistake or if I've disrespected you, I hope that this offering can make up for it. So what I took it as was, this offering is not making up for it, you need to do something else. To which then I've done finally a reading with her last week after 2 months that I wasn't. And that reading was a bit different from my usual ones because it was literally, what are my wrongs? How can I make up for it? But you know what? What were my goods, if there's anything you liked? And it was a kind of consistent reading, so it made sense, so I went along with that. For example, I'm filming this on a Monday. I should have done my reading with her yesterday. I didn't. I did it first thing this morning. Going back to my autism and routines, was I happy about that? No, my brain was bleeding and melting. But I pushed myself to do it. And even if it was a Monday, I at least did it. And so it's a struggle, it's a balance. What I am doing to strengthen the relationship again is to pay more actual attention, not just going through the motion of lighting my candles and saying the things with the candles. For example, this morning I've done it, but I had nothing in the background. There wasn't radio, there wasn't TV. I just spent a moment there. It's these little things. On the syncretism of Vesta and Hestia, I mentioned it at the very end of my Vesta video. I have a natural tendency to believe that she syncretizes very well with Bastet, because Bastet was the goddess of the house as well, of the heart. Although this is probably based mainly in the domain of reference that modern witchcraft does with deities, because from antiquity and from actually the Encyclopedia Britannica of the 1800s, the syncretization of Vesta and Hestia in Egyptian deities was considered Anukis or Anuket. And on the matter of what was her domain, I don't quite understand why they overlap. My best guess is that Anuket or Anukis and Vesta and Hestia overlapped in the way that they were respected and worshipped in their cultures of references, because Anukis was the goddess of the Nile and the floods of the Nile. So when the Nile was flooding, there was this earth, dirt, loam, the limo. What's it called? Limo, probably loam, that fertilized the land, and so they could be used for agriculture. So she was the goddess of that, which doesn't sound that close to the home and the heart and the family. And so the best guess that I can give is the kind of cult of Anukis in antique Egypt must have been similar to the cult of Vesta in Rome, which besides being the goddess of the heart and the family, was considered the protectress of Rome. There was the cult and the Vestals, which it's all this kind, it's the way that the cult manifests. So that's my guess there. But in modern witchcraft, I completely understand the overlap with Bast, even though there aren't official sources that say that. Now, this is the last question, which it's proper for a last question. What in your craft makes you happiest? So there are a lot of things that I've started to do with the excuse of witchcraft that are now part of my life, that have improved the quality of my life. The joy that it gives me when I go around, have a walk, and now recognize plants that before I had no idea were there, because after identifying it once, twice, 3 times on Picture This, I have a video about that, I'll link it down in the description below, on connecting to the land. But now that I can recognize plants, every time is exciting, every time is a burst of joy, and that's... Is that the most? It's all these little things. It's when I found Mugwort again and I realized that it was Mugwort. It's when it allowed me to connect in real life with people. Last month I met Imogen from Sapling Tarot in Bristol, and they are such a wonderful person. Regardless if we ever are to share our tarot practice or our witchcraft practice, they are an amazing person that gives me hope, because people like that exists. Would I have found them or gone in touch with them if I didn't get into witchcraft? No, but that is amazing, therefore. The people that I know in my coven here, same thing. Would I know some of them if I hadn't been invited to the group chat? No, and they improve my life, and some of them are very dear friends of mine that improve my life through that. So there are a lot of sides of my practice that have affected my everyday life and do affect my everyday life for the better. And all those things make me incredibly happy. The happiest, if I were to say in a very selfish and practical way, would be the day that I speak to a deity or a spirit or one of my ancestors in such an unequivocal way that it will be proven to me that this life is not all there is. And I technically should say that similar things have happened already that should give me proof that Believe me, you're so much more than a bunch of meat pressed together that has suddenly risen consciousness. But I have a natural hesitance and skepticism, especially towards myself. So something that happens unequivocally, proving to me that this is a stepping stone in many that I've stepped on before and many that I will step upon again, with people that I have loved and have passed away, people that I love and I never want to pass away, my cats, that would be... Oh, that was long, and until next time, please, let's all hex the patriarchy together, because there's so much need for it.